After a devastating conflict that left Gaza in ruins and cost tens of thousands of lives, a radical and honestly a deeply controversial new plan has surfaced. It's called the Board of Peace. And it's not just a small tweak. It proposes a complete reinvention of how to govern one of the world's most difficult conflicts. But the real question is this a real blueprint for a stable future, or is it something else entirely? So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we have to understand why this plan was even put on the table. Then we'll peek inside this boardroom, check out its powerful security force, and really dig into the massive debate over sovereignty. And finally, we'll ask the big question: could this thing actually replace the UN? And we'll see how a major power like India is trying to figure out its next move in this high-stakes game. To really get why this plan even exists, we have to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the crisis it's supposed to fix. We're not just talking about rebuilding a few things. We're talking about creating order from, well, absolute chaos. So how did we even get here? Well, after years of brutal conflict and one failed ceasefire after another, diplomacy was basically dead in the water. Then, in late 2025, the U.S. rolls out this new, pretty aggressive roadmap. And in a move that surprised a lot of people, the UN Security Council quickly gave it the green light, which officially brought the Board of Peace into existence. And really, the entire reason for this plan comes down to this one staggering number: over 70,000 lives lost. That catastrophic human cost created a vacuum, a desperate need for a solution. Any solution, no matter how unconventional it might seem. So what is this Board of Peace really? Well, you can forget everything you think you know about traditional diplomatic bodies. This thing is structured less like the UN and a lot more like a top-down, multi-layered corporation. At its heart, the Board of Peace is this huge experiment in something called mini-lateralism. It's a very deliberate move away from the big, often deadlocked UN system. The whole idea is to have a smaller, more focused, executive-style group where a few key players can just call the shots and get things done. And this table just lays out that corporate hierarchy perfectly. Right at the top, you've got the main board, chaired by the U.S. president. Underneath that, an executive board with global heavy hitters like former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and they're making the big strategic calls. Then there's a regional board. And way down at the bottom, Tier 4, is a Palestinian committee tasked with the day-to-day stuff. Just look at where all the power is concentrated. And here is maybe the most radical part of the whole thing: the price tag. If a country wants a permanent seat on the board, it costs $1 billion. This isn't just about funding reconstruction. It's a pay-to-play model that literally monetizes influence in global peacemaking. It's a massive shift from diplomacy to, well, a business transaction. All right, let's switch gears and talk about the muscle behind this plan: the International Stabilization Force, or ISF. Now, this is not your typical UN Blue Helmet operation. So how exactly is it supposed to keep the peace?
Well, its mandate is incredibly strong. That phrase, all necessary measures, that's basically UN code for using military force. This mandate allows for proactive operations to disarm groups and to destroy infrastructure. That is a huge, aggressive step away from traditional, defensive peacekeeping.
And this comparison is so key to understanding the ISF. It just doesn't follow the old rules. It operates in close cooperation with Israel, which makes you wonder about impartiality. And its mission is to proactively destroy, not just defend. It's no wonder some analysts are calling it less of a peacekeeping force and more of an ad hoc counterterrorism operation. And this leads us right to the central conflict of this entire plan. Is this a real path to Palestinian self-determination and statehood? Or is it something else entirely, just dressed up in the language of rebuilding? Critics have come up with a really powerful label for this plan: Oslo with helmets. It's a callback to the Oslo Accords from the 90s, which promised a path to statehood that never really happened. The fear here is that this new plan is just a militarized version of that, a super securitized setup that talks about sovereignty, but is actually designed to put it off forever. So it all boils down to this: who actually has the final say? The model's been called a sovereignty minus framework, which is a clever way of saying it gives the appearance of local control while the real power is held somewhere else. So while you have this committee of Palestinian technocrats running daily services, schools, hospitals, They are stuck at the very bottom of that four-tier pyramid. They have no seat at the big table where the real decisions are made, and their authority comes from the bid, not from the Palestinian people. This has led to some incredibly sharp criticism, with people calling it a corporate takeover or a commercial trusteeship. Okay, let's zoom out for a second because the ripple effects of this model could go way beyond Gaza. The real question is this just a one-off solution for a uniquely tough problem, or are we looking at a new challenger to the entire international system that's been in place since World War II? I mean, just look at this slide. It shows what a radical change this is. The Board of Peace is a direct challenge to the UN model. Where the UN is built on the idea that all nations are sovereign equals, this board is built on the power of its biggest funders. Where the UN strives for consensus, this board runs on the chairman's authority. Its own charter apparently dismisses existing institutions as failures, which really signals its ambition to become a permanent transactional alternative to our current rights-based system. So why should the rest of the world care? Let's look at the huge strategic dilemma this creates for a rising global power like India, which was one of the first countries invited to join. For a country like India, this decision is a classic diplomatic tightrope walk. On one hand, joining gets them a seat at a very powerful new table and gives them more leverage in a critical part of the world. But the potential cost is huge. They'd be bypassing the traditional multilateral system they've always supported, and they'd be lending legitimacy to a plan that might not have any real local support. So far, New Delhi has been playing this very, very carefully. They've welcomed a peace process in principle, but they've also made it crystal clear they will not be sending any troops. And they specifically said it's because the ISF is not a traditional UN peacekeeping mission. So for now, it's a cautious waiting game. So, at the end of the day, this new model is efficient, it's definitely well-funded, and it's decisive. But it leaves us with a fundamental choice for the future of global peace. Is the answer a bold new system that replaces international law with transactional power? Or does real, lasting peace actually require something you can't buy? The legitimacy that can only come from self-determination and the sovereign equality of all people? That's the billion-dollar question.